Yeah, it's a combination. I just think we got to be a little more consistent. It's one guy here or there on some plays. It's missing a hole on another play. And they had the box packed, so it made it a little tough, but we still need to be able to pop a few more of those. And it's got to be a collective effort. Tight ends, running backs, offensive line, receivers.
Welcome back. Severe and Benny in the morning, 1620 The Zone. One of the few times that we could have used the cut in the old game. Did those coaches really say that? That would have worked pretty well. Sam McEwen joining us. He is the sports editor for the Omaha World Herald. He's also a columnist and has the Sip and Sam Showdown on Husker Extra, joining us here on Severe and Benning in the morning. Your number one most indelible memory of the Oklahoma-Nebraska series, Sam, go.
Probably the one that I remember that I went to was the 91 game.
Oh.
So
okay.
That was I think at the time it was kind of dubbed Husker Magic because Oklahoma had won so many games for Sooner Magic. But probably the 91 game, it was the weather was not good. It was more like a sleet storm. It wasn't cold, but it was wet. And I remember, Derek Brown slipping on the kickoff.
Yep.
At the 2, and them having to start the first drive of the game at the 2, and just to come back, it was special. Nebraska dominated that game in the second half. Johnny Mitchell. And then, I watched it on TV. My parents went to it, but the 86 game was real memorable because I think I remember that game because of the way Oklahoma won. They really didn't have much business winning the game. It should have been a tie at worst, and it wasn't. And pass interference on that long pass. It was obvious pass interference. So, just memories from my childhood more than recent years.
Nebraska, since falling behind by 2 touchdowns, dominating plays, time of possession, but they still trail it by a point. Jones again, big hole on the left. Jones for the end zone. Nebraska leads for the first time.
Yeah, 91. Ice Bowl, baby.
Yeah.
It was great. That was a fun game.
Sam, so this is interesting, especially growing up here. You know what it means. You're at that kind of age threshold that everybody was talking about yesterday on social media about the demarcation of what the game means to you. Do you find it hard not to go there historically, given the current climate is so much different, but it's still Nebraska, Oklahoma?
Yeah, we're going to go there historically this week.
Yeah, Tom went there yesterday.
Hey, I'm just going to tell you, DB, we're going there.
Yeah, Tom did it pretty well.
I mean, absolutely. There's a lot to. Yeah, I mean it's just an important game, and I think people are going to remember it for that reason.
Well, with all the hand wringing when Nebraska allegedly was trying to get out of the game, that's what people harken back to. So it must be a thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. You remember your last game against Oklahoma. That was a hard watch, if you're an Oklahoma fan. I think it was 73-21. So, there have been moments in the series where Oklahoma was on the wrong end of things and they didn't look like they had it together. And I don't think Nebraska's going to be losing 73-21 on Saturday. There's circumstances where even if it's a lopsided result, it still matters. It'll be cool to see that helmet again, in person. It'll be cool to see it next year when they come up here. Those things still matter. And so, yeah, I mean, with Oklahoma going to the SEC, I know this is really Pollyannish, but with Oklahoma going to the SEC, there's a much greater chance that Nebraska will face Oklahoma in a bowl game. Because the Big Ten and the Big 12 didn't really have any games together, and the Big Ten and the SEC do. So there's always a chance that at some, woe-begone year for Oklahoma, they go 9-3, and Nebraska has a good year at 9-3, and they're playing in the Outback Bowl.
Remember way
How
back
cool
when?
Will that be?
Oh, I don't know, like 5 years ago when the fan base was comparing the recruiting profile to Oklahoma. That doesn't seem that long ago.
No, that program, credit Bob Stoops. He walked away at the right time, just the right time, and was able to infuse that program with a lot of energy with Lincoln Riley. He picked his successor, and he was able to pick a guy in sort of an unorthodox way, and he gave that guy a long runway, and he gave him a senior quarterback who won a Heisman. And so he did it at the right time, and he created a runway for that quarterback or for that coach, Lincoln Riley, to put Oklahoma where they are now.
Sam McEwen joining us here on Severe and Benny in the Morning, the sports editor, the Omaha World Herald. No sacks for Nebraska against Buffalo. Was it the way Buffalo did things? Are you worried? Is it an ominous vision ahead, thinking about Nebraska having to get pass rush on Spencer Rattler? What do you think about not getting any sacks?
It's a little concerning. It isn't a 5-alarm deal. And the reason it isn't is because both Buffalo and Fordham, those quarterbacks were getting the ball off pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'd been sacked 5 times in his career. Right.
There you go. So
in his career.
The way they're running their offenses was, they were throwing the ball fast. And they only threw Buffalo only threw a couple of passes beyond 20 yards. And Nebraska covered those really well. So, there's some things that quarterbacks can do. Andy Dalton, for example, against the Rams. I mean, if Andy had stood back there and waited for the routes to get open, he might have been sacked 12 times. So, but he was getting rid of the ball and whatever. So there's ways that you can affect it without getting a sack. Now, that said, Oklahoma is not going to be afraid of Nebraska's pass rush. Nebraska's going to have to show that it can get after Rattler and sack him. And they are going to try to press the ball downfield because they do that with everybody. Oklahoma is not going to – they're going to game plan a little bit, but they're not going to game plan Nebraska and go, well, we're still worried about X, that we're not going to do Y. That's not going to happen. They're going to try to push the ball downfield, whether Nebraska's given up any big passes this year or not, because they feel good about who they are. And Nebraska better be ready not only to get after Rattler and sack him a few times, but be ready to cover some deep routes down.
1 sack in the last 10 quarters.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Sam, can I make the case? I don't even know if I should say talent aside. Let's just talk scheme. If you're Nebraska, would you rather face a scheme like Oklahoma or an offensive scheme like Buffalo?
Oh, well, schematically.
I mean, what if Oklahoma can't run the ball?
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Buffalo didn't have that much success running it either.
Hey, sometimes doing it, especially in the first half, look what it yielded. It wasn't more than 3 yards a carry, but it sure had folks sitting on their hands.
Sure. That's fair. I don't know. I feel like Oklahoma's system is pretty diverse. We'll see what they do. They've shown the ability to run the ball. They've been one of the nation's best rushing teams a number of years, but that was when they used the quarterback. So when Jalen Hurts is there, good luck stopping him running the ball. And very few teams did that year when Hurts was there because Hurts was running the ball 20 times a game and physically able to deal with it, which is still pretty amazing to remember. They're not doing that right now. They don't want Rattler doing that. I'm not sure he would be very good at doing that. But I also think that there's an understanding now that if you want to be the very best team in the country, and Oklahoma's context at this moment is to win the national title or to win a game in the playoffs. That's not what you do with your quarterback. You don't turn him into Tebow. You look at the teams that have won. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. They have all kind of moved to this, hey, Joe Burrow, LSU. Well, they've all moved to this NFL, NFL first-round draft pick quarterback thing where it's about the quarterback and you're going to empty it out, you're going to throw the football, and all these things. And Oklahoma's trying to do that. They're trying to be that. And Georgia is not. Georgia's still kind of in the we're going to run the ball, and we're going to have a fullback, and we're going to, shove it down your throat. These other teams have kind of moved to these open systems that are sort of like what the Patriots were doing when Brady was there, that kind of thing. And so, you have to adapt. And I think Oklahoma's trying to adapt, knowing that they can't run a glorified wing T in the playoffs. So that probably hurts them a little at times during the regular season. But they're going to try to run the ball, and Nebraska's going to have to be. They're going to have to be ready for it. They don't have a lot of good backs. That's part of their issue.
Yeah.
Kennedy Brooks is there, and they don't have a lot of good running backs right now.
Yeah, I think Gray could be the guy, but you're right. I mean, they've got two, and then it's like maybe a backup quarterback.
How do you handle if you want the defense? Or you say, well, let's just whoever's back there, Kennedy, Brooks, or whoever, stop them and then make Rattler beat them? Or
well, they get so vertical in the passing game, guys. That may play to Nebraska's strengths.
Or back off and say we're going to let you have stuff in front of us, make them go long field, and wait for them to make a mistake.
That's a good question. It's a good question to ask Eric Chenander. So far this year, I think that Nebraska has been comfortable with its red zone defense in a way, and they've been good down there. They've been good. Inside their own 40, they've been good, really.
Yeah, how about the sudden change last Saturday?
Yeah, they've been pretty I think they've been comfortable to say, all right, go score. We're not going to give you one. We're going to make you go down there. I think one exception to the rule was that big long play at Illinois when I don't know what Quentin Newsom was. He says he was blitzing. He didn't blitz. I don't know what he kind of faked a blitz, and they ran some sort of stunt on that first down, and Illinois hit it. They hit it for a big throw, and that was a huge touchdown in the game. And I think Nebraska felt like they had to do something because they were down 14, and they, Cherney punted the ball 25 yards or whatever. So they were like at their own 40. But anyway, I digress. I think they would say, hey, we're going to force you to complete 7 passes,
right,
to score. And that's the way I would envision them doing it. I think Scott Frost is the head coach, though, and he needs to think about game control and how they want to do that. And I would think that Nebraska believes it needs to possess the ball in order to win, and needs to kind of win the time of possession and keep it away from Oklahoma a little bit. So I think you'll see some of that. I think Nebraska executes a little bit better, to be very honest with you, when they're not going 100 miles an hour. I think when you're going really fast, your offensive line needs to be pretty darn good, and I just haven't seen that yet. How about Teddy Prohaska? I just wonder if he's played his way into playing at left tackle every other drive. I just wonder.
Sam, I had no idea that he was going to come up yesterday and the presser, but I asked Michael during the show. We were talking about offensive line, and this is the second week in a row I said, hey, how about Teddy Prohaska, right? Like, he looks like a guy that when he's playing, at least plays with some oomph, right? Like the results matter. Because there's two things that worry me about Nebraska's offensive line, and I want to get your thoughts on this. It's already a tough sport played by tough people. So sometimes I just wonder about just toughness, right? Mm-hmm. Like, technique aside, just not wanting to take what the opponent gives you. And then the other thing is just his sheer size, right? Like, he's a mountain of a guy, and he moves ridiculously well for his frame.
Yeah. Yeah, so Frost, I asked Frost about Prohaska, partially because, and here's a little understanding of how journalism works. Teddy came up and talked to us, and he was good. I mean, he was up there for about 10 minutes. Somebody had requested him. I don't know if it was us or somebody else. And so usually what I'm trying to do there is help out my colleague and say, I'm going to go ask Frost about this guy, because we weren't going to get Greg Austin on Tuesday, which we're not. We're going to get Mario Verduzco and Travis Fisher. And so, I'm like, let's get a second source here. And maybe the second source should be Turner Corcoran.
Oh, I get it. I like that.
We go into, I'm like, let's talk to Frost. I'll ask Frost about it. And I thought Frost's answer was pretty telling, in the sense that, in the inflection of his voice, he wasn't ruling out this true freshman playing a lot more. I think they want to kind of see maybe if Turner kind of turns the corner. Corcoran's a very honest guy. I appreciate him. He's struggling coming back from the injury. So he said that yesterday. He's like, it's a little hard right now for me, and I'm not playing as well as I was in the spring. He's an honest kid. I appreciate that. Very honest. And, so there's clearly work to do there, and Teddy's 3 or 4 inches taller. He's just as broad in terms of his shoulders. Probably doesn't have as big of a chest. I mean, I think Corcoran could be a guard at the next level. Still think he's going to be a really good player at Nebraska. And I just wonder if that's something you do, because 69 is struggling, and part of this is that he's just struggling, and they obviously don't want Brant Banks out there, or he'd be out there. So I think Prohaska has come along in a way where maybe they're willing to look at playing him a little bit more. You don't want to do that; it's not ideal, but Teddy's a huge guy, and I feel like he's played pretty well in his limited number of snaps. The left tackle's been a problem, and the 2 guards are a concern. And I don't know what you do about the guard position, because there's been plays, and there were plays against Buffalo where neither one of them touched anybody, and it wasn't because they weren't trying or they weren't tough. They just didn't hit anybody because they missed.
You said one was struggling. I was like, well, so is 57 and 70, but Newelly comes in, he plays a little bit, and you know what? Trent Hickson wasn't horrible last year. We know Trent Hickson can play the guard spots, either one of them.
Hey, you guys.
Yeah, it's notable that Newelly was in there, and I thought they ran the ball pretty well on a couple of drives. I think that's a huge work in progress, that position. They're nowhere near the finished product. The key is you can't miss people. You just can't miss people. And that's part of what's been happening.
Let me ask you guys something. Oh, I guess Sam, since I can talk to Michael anytime. Bringing up Hickson is interesting for me, because it's kind of like what I was saying about Martinez, how we've kind of settled into thinking we know what he is. When Hickson has shown you flashes, and yeah, there have been some times where you're like, I wonder if this is going to be the norm. But he's shown you levels of consistency. Do you think Nebraska suffers a little bit from, well, we think we know because you've done this for X amount of times, as opposed to assuming that guys can just get better? Sometimes I think they're guilty of resting in maybe some of the negatives they've seen, even though players can typically play their way into being better given the opportunity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think it's sure, absolutely.
Because Hickson has been more than serviceable at times, and yeah, he's had a few. That didn't look good. I think Rutgers comes to mind.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But why not rest in the good that he did? Just because somebody didn't play well in that particular juncture doesn't mean they're always not going to play well. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I do. I would say that sometimes when you're in a position management role, and this is not just in football, but really in anything, you kind of have an idea in your mind, and you kind of want to see it play out. And when the evidence presents itself otherwise, you're nevertheless reluctant to change it because you've already changed. And you kind of want to see if what you have in mind is going to come to fruition over the course of 6 weeks. And that's much harder to do in a high-profile job like college football. There are things that you try, and sometimes you have to accept very quickly, this isn't going to work. We have to go back to whatever we were doing, or we have to make this adjustment. I've never asked Coach Osborne this, but back to that 91 football season, there was a decision at quarterback. I think, Mickey Joseph started the first game. I think Tom Haas was second string and Keaton McCant was third string.
Right.
And then by the second game, they had reversed the entire order. And there must have been something that he noticed and had the courage to make a change that fast.
Right.
And say, no, we're going to go, whatever I had just decided 2 weeks ago in camp was wrong. And Coach Solich did the same thing in 99, where after 2 games, he realized, nope, the decision I had made, to anoint Bobby in that role was not the one that's going to get us closest to the Big 12 championship. Sometimes coaches have to be able to shift on the fly like that. And second guess their own plans very quickly. And sometimes everybody in management has to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes your ideas don't work. And the quicker that you realize that they don't work, the better that probably is for everybody.
Sam, we appreciate it. I will tell you this. From now on, it's going to be 31-3 is the official final of that game, by the way, because, the field goal was good. So we're just going to make it 31-3 if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it was
fine.
Too. I think it was too.
They stopped officiating late. They wanted the game to be over. I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't miss those.
Yeah.
I think I don't know what. I just think they had a hard day, and
it was hot for them too.
I don't know.
It was hot for them too.
It was.
Yep.
It was.
Yep. All right, Sam. Have a great week, man.
You too.
All right, Sam McEwen.
I want to say something real quick because this is important. You hear me say this about a lot of things in life. Usually I'm talking about education and young people. And I think it's for people in positions of leadership, management, relationships, and whatever else. If you want to establish a good rapport with somebody and get them to maximize, I can't stress how important enough it is for meeting people right where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Like right where they're at. Like in the moment, where are you? Let me meet you where you're at. And by that I mean this whole practice player versus a gamer versus having your mind made up about a guy. And you've either dated people like this or worked with people like this. They think they know something about you,
mm-hmm.
and it's up to you to prove or disprove that. So the whole relationship is under this guise of, are you what I think you are? See, that's not healthy because you have a bias because you're looking for a desired outcome because that's what you already think. So the importance is to meet people right where they're at. Be open to having your mind changed. So because a guy was poor Monday through Wednesday doesn't mean he's not capable of bouncing back Thursday and Friday before you rule him out on a Saturday if you meet them right where they're at. Nebraska has to reconcile that in their head as a staff so you're not married to a thought process of, oh, that guy is exactly who we thought they are. Because it's weird when you play young players that haven't played a ton. Things change.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes live reps matter to the good and to the bad. Keep meeting people where they're at currently.
Hour number 3 next.